I ain't gonna tell y'all what she was just doing to the microphone stand. Don't let the Southern Belle stuff fool y'all. You got any Houston songs? You good? Feel like being gangster? That's a no.
Yeah, it didn't. It just didn't come out the way that I thought it was gonna come out.
She in her feminine bag right now for reasons we can't divulge in this moment.
But if you read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
All right, welcome to episode 8
Salud.
of Remembering Me, a soul healing podcast. I am one of your hosts, Candace Love.
I'm your boy, Brick City Buddha. Just call me Docs.
The bull.
The ball.
The ball.
Shout out to Easy. And shout out to Kira too. Shout out to our guest that's been rocking with us as of late. It's been a beautiful experience to include other perspectives.
Yeah, it's been really cool to interview people as well and like have people that want to be on our podcast.
Right.
We just started.
Right.
So that's felt really great.
Absolutely. And I guess it's apropos because we are expanding, the perspectives we have in front of this camera, right? So we're growing our podcast family.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of apropos low key that we're having this conversation today about blended families.
I see what you did there.
Always
That was
bars.
nice, yeah.
Always bars.
That was nice.
You know what I mean? I don't know if the title will actually be like Blended Family Bible, but we're going to kind of take the same approach we took with the Breakup Bible and just discuss our experiences with, having this new, really, I've heard the term before, but didn't really understand the difference between blended family and nuclear family, and what we actually exist in, which we'll explain in a second, is a nuclear family, but it's still kind of all part of the same pot. And we just felt like this conversation was necessary based on the experiences we have had, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the lessons we've already been able to gather in this experience, because we know a lot of people are going through the same thing.
Absolutely.
I was just looking up some of the statistics.
Okay.
For divorce, the studies are somewhere between 40 and 45% divorce rate in the U.S. That was as of 22, so it may have 2022. It may have went up. As far as blended families, we're talking about a 40% rate in America. And again, a lot of these studies are probably based on the census of non-melanated families, so it may even be higher
For sure, right.
in our community. But the one that really stood out is that nuclear families, 7 out of 10 families in the U.S. are nuclear in some way, shape, or form.
And what does that mean?
So the difference with the blended family, like, if Marty was actually in this house, that's more so like permanently living here, that's more so of a blended family. So whatever that dynamic that may look like for somebody else, it's more so like the actual physical inclusiveness of 2 different families, my kids, your kids, and we all together in the same house.
Okay, yeah.
The nuclear family is probably what's a little more predominant, and again, 7 out of 10 families, but that's more so like almost by default. I'm with you, I have a son, we have to find ways to make it work as far as that nuclear family concept. So not necessarily like forcing the children together and that type of thing, but we still got to make certain accommodations as a group, as a unit, that whole nuclear family approach.
Yeah, so it's like the nuclear family is what it is, but the blended family is the essence, and to a certain degree, the energy that the family would want to have, that inclusion, that blendedness, that all togetherness.
Right. And low key, coming from our lineage, and we'll talk about lineage soon as well in this conversation, but that's kind of where we come from.
Yeah.
The African tribes, Kemet, Egyptology, they all shared the same living communities. They all shared the same space, the same responsibilities, the same tasks. And we was kind of just talking about the other day how a lot of other ethnicities still kind of carry that approach.
Yeah.
Like, I'm from Jersey. I'm from an area where a lot of black and brown people, a lot of Spanish people as well. And I just always have like really admired Latino people and their approach when they come to this country. You'll see a 3-family house, is 30 cars in the driveway. It's like, what's going on over there? but they don't have this thing about, well, we all got to have our own. It's America.
Right.
I got to do me. They stay together. They all go to work, have their own individual jobs. They come back, they pay the bills together, they party all weekend, and they do it again next week. For whatever reason, especially black people, we have this thing about what you got to be out the house by 18.
Mm-hmm.
And in no way, shape, or form, if you come back to the house, do we deem that as success for you or for our family. So we always are so quick to separate. And a lot of times we don't get enough of the downloads we need to even know how to have a family.
Yeah, and that's true. One of the things that I always admired about how my mom raised me, I'm an only child. And so my mom and I are very close. And I do also take into consideration that some of those people who did leave the house didn't have healthy relationships with their parents.
Right.
However, one of the things that my mom always pointed to me is you don't have to ever leave.
Right.
She was like, you know, I want you to always stay as long as you need to so you can save your money. Her main thing was, ain't nobody trying to pay no bills. And she would always say that. And, you know, even in high school or college growing up, when my friends were like off at their dorms and, you know, my life didn't take me on that journey, but friends were at their dorms and then they would get to go back home. And my mom would always tell me, just wait and see. Everybody's going to at some point move back home with their parents. And if they don't move back at home with their parents, they're gonna struggle and they're gonna want to.
Right.
And so that kind of setup that my mom created for us was a beautiful setup because I didn't have the pressure of the world like other young adults did. I was able to stay home and feel safe and feel provided for and save my money.
How did that feel initially? Was there any resistance?
Absolutely. I felt, and I actually wrote about this in my book that I'm writing. I felt very left out. Oh, yeah, read books. I know that's right.
It's coming.
I felt very left out. I felt less than. I felt inferior. I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed that everyone else on the outside looked as if they were adhering to the societal timeline of you have to graduate at this age. You have to go to college at this age. You have to get a degree. You have to graduate college and then you get a family. You know, you get married, have kids. And I was in the midst of my depression. Right. So I was clear that these things were not on the table for me. Right. I was working through other things while they were at college, you know, partying and getting their degrees. But there was still a part of me that was like, well, I'm not on the same timeline as everyone else. And I felt behind instead of just acknowledging. I didn't have the tools to acknowledge that everyone does not have to adhere to that invisible timeline. And my mama giving me the permission to stay home, like subtly and subconsciously gave me the opportunity to rewrite my own timeline. So then I could learn, no, I get to do things when it's meant for me to do them. And then when I saw my friends, like, man, I wish I could stay at home with my mom. They in they, 23, 24, 25. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a whole police officer and I'm still,
Right. You could have easily been out the house.
Exactly. Yeah. I was making good money. I could have easily left. But her putting that thought process in my head showed me that I didn't want to have my own house. I wanted to do what everyone else was doing because that felt like I was doing the right thing. And if I wasn't doing the things that they were doing, it felt like I was behind. Right. And so that just really gave me permission to say, no, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I didn't recognize that until obviously years later, though.
And you talked about being depressed. Imagine had you stepped out the house at that time, like a lot of us end up doing. I remember all of us romanticizing, and it was a different world, a bar. We used to always watch.
You're good at this.
I ain't even playing that one.
I gotta start taking notes from my husband. God, dog, get my pen game up.
But now we used to watch. That was the name of the show, right? A Different World, And so we romanticized. We kind of glorified being able to go have that college experience. It's probably the same now, but it wasn't as overt as far as that being in our head. And you got the social media age, so college isn't as mandatory as we thought it was for success. But I was on the other end of the spectrum, and it's interesting. I don't know if we ever actually publicly talked about our dynamic in our home structure. People kind of know the story of how the home came to be built. We've talked about that in previous episodes and on our social media. But when I first, was compelled to let you know, it's time. I'm coming, right? Yeah. And part of that decision making, which we'll also get to in a second, was my son's mother and my son was supposed to move to Atlanta. It wasn't the totality of my decision, but it definitely was included in the fact that, well, if I stay in Jersey, I'm going to be further. I'm looking stuff up. It's an 11-hour drive to get to Atlanta. It's lit, right? But it was a lot more that went into the decision. It was part of it.
Absolutely.
But when we first started talking about it, we were like, okay, so what are we going to do as far as living situation? This aspect of the home didn't exist yet. She had the space she needed for herself, but we knew we wanted to create something or have something together. So initially, we having talks of possibly renting, the duplexes downtown and all that type of stuff.
High rises.
We even talked about stuff as humble and creative as tiny homes.
Yeah, tiny
right?
homes.
So we going through all these different things to try to figure out what's supposed to be our lane. And again, I've been breaking my neck in Jersey for the past 15 years, keeping up with the bills. And if y'all from the tri-state area, you know how high the cost of living is. So you doing the best you can to just keep your head above water. I don't know what it's like to not pay bills. Only time I didn't, when I was on disability with my eye, and my parents helped me out for that period of time. But my whole adult life, I've been working hard just to maintain status quo. So when we was going through these different things, you kind of already had in your head, you had kind of assumed that what your mother was suggesting, I was not going to be with.
Yeah.
So you never even brought it to me. And I was still developing my relationship with your mom. Like, Mom, if you're watching this, whenever you get to this, you know the vibes. I love your mother so much. From day one, she is my second mother.
Yeah.
My mother and your mother, our mothers have a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
But we had already been at the point to have enough cachet developed where we could have this conversation and she could suggest to me, like, look, Candace has not had to pay bills. I don't want her to have to go to that if it's not necessary. I know y'all about to build a house. Or I know y'all looking for options for where y'all gonna live. Why not just build a house on top of what she already got? And mind you, Candace's home at that time, same address. Your mom got her house on the same property. Candace had her house. So she was like, why don't y'all just build on top of what's already here? And initially,
I was like, he ain't gonna want to do that. Ain't nobody trying to do that.
Initially, it was some of that program, that societal program, like, you can't live on your mother-in-law's, I don't say law, your mother-in-law's property. That was the first initial aspect of it, like the manhood aspect of it. Like, nah, you got to just go get your own. But as she was talking to me, as it started to download into my spirit, what I already knew about your mother, I knew she wasn't going to be all in our business and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We was going to legitimately have our own space, and we was going to build what we were supposed to build for ourselves. It was like, you know what, let me feel into this, right? I was at least open to the idea, and I sat with it for a few days. I'm like, yo, I told Candace, like, I think I'm with that. I think that makes sense, and a huge piece of it, she just kept harping on, don't you want, like, financial freedom?
Man.
I mean, of course, y'all going to have bills and things to pay for. Y'all are both entrepreneurs, but you don't got to break your neck no more to do this. Had she not taken that stance, had you not taken that stance at 17, 18 years old, you don't set the foundation for me to come along 15 years later.
Absolutely.
And us be able to share this space. So when we say we don't have the type of bills other people have, this is something that's been downloading for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And you having to push past societal programs, me having to push past the idea of what manhood is supposed to be, for us to not just have this home for ourselves, but for us to have this space for the community.
Absolutely. And it's crazy because my mom, she used to always say, you ain't never got to move out. You and your husband can live here. And I used to tell her, ain't nobody trying to do that.
Right.
And then
there wasn't no husband then.
Right, exactly. So, and then as time went on, you know, I built, so we have a huge amount of land to have a really nice size home. And so to a certain degree, this is like a duplex.
Yeah.
But it's just like a really, really, really nice duplex.
On our terms, yep.
Yeah. And so I was able to build like a certain portion for myself. It was like an efficiency apartment. Mm-hmm. Everything that I needed that a person would have in an apartment, way bigger than what would be in a New York apartment or a New Jersey apartment. It's a loft. It's upstairs, downstairs, bathroom, kitchen, all of the things. And so when my mom brought it to our attention about like, let's do this, let's just figure out something here, because I ain't want to live in no apartment.
Right.
I ain't never lived in no apartment a day in my life. And I've never had a desire to live in an apartment. The only time I ever had a desire was to do something like a high rise downtown.
Right.
But that was in my younger years. In my adult years, it's nothing fun about being in a city like that. And so I truly didn't want, and then also I was thinking about Cleo. She needs a yard.
Right, absolutely.
And so I was like, I can't really figure out how that's going to work, but I was open because I wanted us to, you know, be able to move forward. So when you said yes, it was nothing. You ain't said nothing but a word. We ain't got to pay no bills.
Word. We just got to build this house.
That's it. And I think the huge part was financial freedom for both of us. I think that was like my first year going into entrepreneurship, and we're both entrepreneurs. So knowing that our bills are like $500, $200 a piece, you know, or $250. I know for all the mathematics people out there.
Mine was $3,500 a month where I was living at.
Exactly. Yeah. So now having the opportunity to have not just financial freedom, but mental freedom of not having to worry and stress about money. We live in a home that is so beautiful that whatever we choose to create is going to flourish just because we feel good about our environment. But had my mama not instilled like, nah, you are different. You can create your own rules. You can create your own Bible on how you do things. You can create your own timeline. And whatever was everybody else is doing, you don't have to do that. You do whatever works best for you.
Right. And shout out to, again, your mom, Mae West.
My mama is a G. Yeah, she's definitely a G.
Facts. But when this process started to happen, of course, what comes up also as a father, being with my son pretty much every day of his life. And of course, when the initial recalibration of my relationship with him and his mother started, it went from every day of my life with my son to still I'm with him half the week. But one of the things I had to reconcile with and make peace with was the fact that in this move, and my son's mother decided not to go to Atlanta like at the very last hour. So initially, as soon as I got that information, it's like, all right, I'm really about to be far from my son. So one of the things I did want to talk about was dispensation. The Bible talks a lot about that word. There was the dispensation of the New Testament, the Old Testament, and yoga, we call them yugas, right? Epochs or eras of time where there are shifts of energy in the human experience. So the yugas is like an actual calculation based on where the planetary bodies are in reference to the earth, how things change on this planet. The yugas have produced the dark ages, right? The enlightenment ages. All these different ages are based on the yugas. So I feel like right now we are in a dispensation, the generation, it being Kali Yuga, and things being like really squeezed into a certain level of destruction and death for new things to be born. I feel like as families, as human family, we are in a dispensation where what we was used to 30, 40 years ago is no longer, not even just the norm, but it's not really conditioned for the current human experience. And, I grew up in a household. My parents have been together, I think, 38, 39 years. I may be lowballing it. It could be over 40. But for most of us in my community, it was seeing that families be together, and even if the families separate, we still grew up with both parental aspects there. I feel like this age of children, I feel like this age of family is about learning at a certain level of speed that wasn't the case before.
Absolutely.
Things were more spaced out in previous generations. I know people talk about like star seeds, and these past 2 or 3 generations is the generation of awakening from like the flower people down to what's going on right now. So with awakening, with those levels of seeing more of ourselves, processes have to be expedited. And we all get to a point in our life, usually 20s, 30s, how it used to happen, where you start to realize I'm in this to a certain degree by myself. I got to figure out my path for myself. And with that comes a certain level of isolation, solitude at some point in people's lives where you realize I can't depend on people, places, and things. If you got this whole generation of starseeds, what's going to expedite that process? for them to have to learn detachment skills, even down to detachment to a certain degree with parents at a way younger age. So a lot of parents are beating themselves up right now and feeling guilty. A lot of fathers who live 1,400 miles away from their kids, or mothers, vice versa. We feel guilty because we're not in the home every single day. And I feel like to a large degree, this current generation of children, their souls need that type of environment to have their path expedited, to expand, to grow faster than we possibly could have, because we had the luxury of having the incubators of families and communities. Even though your father wasn't super present, you still had your whole family. You had your cousins, your uncles. You still had that infrastructure of family that a lot of children no longer have that. And the people that end up in these situations, the parents feel bad about it. But I feel like this is exactly what's supposed to be happening. This is what the universe is kind of dictating in this game of chess in the human experience, where children are being pulled out of these incubators and being forced to go to deeper levels, quicker levels of detachment. What you feel about that?
Yeah, I think so. You know, the average person right now has way more information than they did 10 years ago. And I don't know the exact statistic, but it is documented that what a person learns now in regards to information is completely different. So that also means that their experiences are completely different.
Right.
It also means that they're downloading way more information into the psyche that, to a certain degree, that the mind doesn't even have the ability to really process. And so we do have to make sure that our children are in environments that are giving them the tools to adapt to these environments that aren't within our control.
Right.
And so to a certain degree, every parent has to honor that they have to do what is best for them.
Exactly.
Because how many parents did you have like, oh my God, I'm just going to figure it out. I'm going to work 3 jobs. And they work 3 jobs just so they can provide for their child.
Right.
And then the child grows up like, but you were never home.
Right.
And then that downloads as trauma. It downloads as abandonment. It downloads as neglect. And so we really have to do what is best for the child in the process of helping them adapt to these environments. Because the area of, especially parents who are like not in the household, kids have adapted so much that they are like, no, but we have FaceTime.
Right.
Back then, if a mom was going to work or dad
True.
was going to work 3 different jobs,
Different
you just
dispensation.
didn't see them until they got home.
Exactly.
And by the time they got home, it was probably time for all the kids to be asleep.
Right.
Now kids are like, no, we got FaceTime. I talk to my dad every day. I see my dad every day. I'm with my dad every day. So the dynamics are really, really different. And we just have to adapt so they can adapt to these new environments as well.
And even with some of my decision making as far as coming down here, like when I realized he wasn't going to be in Atlanta, it was going to be a completely different situation from what I was anticipating. As the download of why it was supposed to happen started to come, I can do more for him being in this type of situation, as opposed to, again, just trying to survive and, you know, generating all this. I was doing very well, but the money coming in and going right out in Jersey. That's not the case here. And just understanding, like, when I push past the guilt of what was based on other people's templates and really was an antiquated system of family. And I'm not knocking it. Families that are traditional, that are together, that's beautiful too. But there's a new level of value coming up on this new type of nuclear and blended family. So that whole staying together for the kids, that type of thing.
Right.
A lot of that is based on the guilt of, well, we got to keep up with the Joneses. We got to keep this family together. We don't want to look like we failed. When people make that decision, it's never about the kids. They don't realize it, but it's about them not having to deal with the fallout of what the child is going to experience, which is still a you thing. You don't want to have to go through that. You don't want to have to feel what your child is feeling via, you know, splitting up the family. And had I not made that decision, had me and Marty's mother not made that decision when we made it, it could have got extremely dangerous. It could have got physically dangerous. My health, which is something I realized was a factor that I didn't even know while I was in Jersey. I got here with the space and time to be able to investigate into certain things I was noticing about my body, and realizing that pressurized environment on a lot of different levels, parental, financial, all these different things. Part of my soul leading me down here was to heal my body. I can't be the best father I can be if I stayed in that prism, that program of, I got to be a man. I got to figure out in Jersey. I needed to be here on so many different levels that's going to spill over into what Marty needs from me as a father. And then you get into the aspect that I kind of wrote down in my notes of soul roles. And a lot of times as parents, like, we look at our children almost not subservient, but that we are the leaders of the ship. Our children are teaching us just as much as we are teaching them every single day. So like we talk about a lot, when we have relationships, we've signed up for certain aspects of what we're supposed to teach and learn from another person. It's the same thing with our children. So to a large degree, I've been able to see and watch and witness me being removed, that luxury of daddy physically already always being here, how he's had to go to higher levels of behavior, how his mom has had to go to higher levels of how she communicates and raises him, and how they are teaching each other certain things that if I was still within that unit, those downloads don't come as quick. They don't come as easy. I'm not going to say easy, but they don't come as quick and as effective. So the soul roles, you got to look at your particular family structure and not just the logistics of it, but if I'm moving away 1,400 miles, what is everybody having an opportunity to level up in? What can everybody learn from this situation, as opposed to, I'm just leaving my son and I feel bad about it? We got to start to look at these things from a higher level than just what was working 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, and I think when we speak about blended families or nuclear families like you introduced, it's very important that everyone has a completely different experience. Mm-hmm. So his experience is more so about the relationship with his son. Mm-hmm. I have chosen, at least in this phase of my life, that I don't care to have children. At least children with, my husband and I together. I just don't feel like that is a calling on me to have children. So even in us choosing to move forward in our relationship, I was clear that I had to be open to accepting a dynamic that I never thought that I would be a part of. And I think I've spoken about this before.
You was opposed to it.
Yeah, I was very open about the notion that I did not want to date anyone who had kids. And it was not because they had kids. It was because I didn't want to deal with baby mama drama, which is essentially what ended up happening. Right. And so I was very honest about the fact that that's just something that I didn't want to have to experience. I just wanted to experience the love. And so because I loved you so much and I saw so many spiritual things that were in alignment, it didn't make sense for me to leave when the drama started to happen. It made sense for me to kind of like sit still and really dissect what is happening, why it's happening, and how is it affecting me, and how am I being called to show up in this space, right, and how am I being called to grow and right, evolve in this space. And so in these blended families, one of the things that I recognized was initially I went into it I was very open. I'm always very kind. I'm very nice, and I don't really bother anybody. And initially, I went into it with open arms. Right. And the relationship with your son's mother started off decent. Right. And then she ended up going through her own emotional trauma, her own residue from the ending of your relationship, you getting into a new relationship, me starting a relationship with Marty, the natural ebbs and flows. And then her treatment towards me became very mean, spiteful, lies, unhealthy. During a lot of times, how she would treat you was ultimately how I would become treated. I would be treated. It would kind of like trickle down from you to me in unnecessary ways. And I think one of the things that people don't speak about in the newness of blended families is how, because y'all already had y'all's relationship. And so now your focus was being parents to your son. And my focus was, well, where do I fit into this equation? How do I fit into this equation when I'm only wanted by one person and I'm openly being told that I'm not wanted by the other person? Right. And so how do I fit into this, still allow it to be in my life and still allow it to, have peace in the situation, And how do I not allow this to change me as a person? And so
as a partner.
And as a partner, because I didn't like her and she ain't like me
Right.
either. I just didn't like her because of how I was being treated, a lot of ways that I did not deserve, and I didn't know how to function in that. So I had to start doing research to figure out, like, what is happening? Why is this happening? Like, I'm trying to be nice, I'm trying to be welcoming, I'm trying to give space, and I just don't really understand how to survive in this dynamic. And when I started looking up research, this is a thing. Like, there are books on blended families and the psychology of the new spouse coming into the dynamic that is already created, and certain aspects of, feeling left out, not knowing how to be a part of the dynamic, having people in the dynamic that are openly not welcoming you into the dynamic, so making you to a certain degree feel like an outsider. And so initially in our dynamic, because you were still in New Jersey before you came to Houston, and I had to really decide, like, how do I want to show up in this dynamic? And initially I kind of just accepted things because it was a relationship that was created before me. I was entering it. And so it just felt as if if things were already happening before I was here, then I just kind of like go along with it. I didn't feel like I had not much of a say, but I felt like I would be overstepping my boundaries if I were to say certain things, even though you were very clear on, if something makes you uncomfortable, whatever, just let me know. But to a certain degree, when it's a lot of things, it's like, is there a part of me that is just flustered because this person is being mean to me, and now I see how I just don't want to have any interaction with her? Or is this really me feeling left out of the dynamic? And so,
or is this not for me?
That was one of the biggest questions that I had to continue to come back to. At some point, it got so unhealthy, how you were being treated, so unhealthy how I was being treated, that I had to say, wait, all of my life is positive. All of my life is love. I have no one in my life that is mean to me, that speaks to me in a way that I don't deserve. Why am I a part of this? How did I get myself into something like this? I really had to ask those questions. Is this even necessary for me to be a part of? And if I am going to be a part of it, how am I going to show up in it? And so I had to recognize that I was doing my best to keep the peace. I wasn't speaking up for myself when it came to her, because I didn't want her to lash out even more at you. I didn't want her to be mean towards you, and then that affect, your relationship with your son and that interaction. If y'all are doing, good, or at least if y'all's interaction is getting towards healthier states, and then I'm like, no, don't do this or don't do that, or I just don't want that because it was a lot of emotional chaoticness that was happening. And so I was like, no, I'm just gonna keep the peace. And then I had to recognize, if I'm going to survive in this dynamic, if I'm gonna thrive in this dynamic, ain't no more keeping the peace, because ain't no way you raising hell and I'm just sitting here watching. So I had to begin setting boundaries and acknowledging what worked for me. What type of dynamic can I exist in? How far am I willing to go in this dynamic? What am I willing to allow? What am I willing to participate in? And even when it came to her, acknowledging, does she even have permission to have access to me anymore? And so there were a lot of uncomfortable conversations that you and I had to have as a result of that.
And even before we got to that point, the first boundary you set had to be with me. And this is also something I was thinking about with this conversation. The men who are in my position as, I guess, the core of the nuclear family, because you got one side, but it's either the man or woman in the middle of it. So I'm the core person in the nuclear family. So with that being said, we have to act as mediators in a lot of different ways, and there's many ways you can do that. But initially, when you first was letting me know that it was getting to a point where you didn't know if this was actually a situation you wanted to continue to be in. You didn't like just say, all right, I'm leaving. You was like, I'm at a point where I need to fill into this. And I still remember that conversation. I still remember like walking around my apartment texting you while you out here. And as I sat with it, I actually, I kind of jumped the gun, and I offered that maybe you should step away from the situation. Because I didn't see yet a version of me that needed to be born from you bringing up the fact that this is too much for me right now. I was just seeing that as, all right, well, this is the ceiling, this is what it is, as opposed to, well, how can I be better and saying what I need to say to whoever, and to putting my foot down, and to setting boundaries for myself, and to not leaving you out. That was a big part of it, because I would take the approach, which a lot of men probably do, when I would get into it, based on the situation with Marty, with her, whatever was going on with the family on that end, I would just kind of go into my cubby hole for a day or for 2 days to not have that energy spill over onto you. I'm thinking I'm doing you a service, and I'm actually doing the opposite, because one, I'm not letting you into what I feel, what I see. And then two, there's these schisms in our ability to be what we already was becoming and what we naturally were. So I was actually taking away your power to choose. Do you have the capacity to even look into my heart? I'm just closing it off and saying, no, give me 2 days, I'll be back. And I'm thinking that's what was supposed to work. So in that first conversation, when you let me know this is not working, what you doing is not working, and this dynamic, it may be to the degree where it's too much for me. That forced me, because of how much I love you, because I did not want to lose you, and because it was my first glimpse at the blind spots of how I was communicating, how I was speaking up for myself, and how I needed to become more skilled at allowing her to think whatever she needed to think about me, to scale back my effort to simply the logistics of how we want to handle Marty. And regardless of how you feel about what we talk, that's up to, we talked about being comfy with being a villain. That started as far as my family dynamic, because once you become a father, the leader of a household, those are two very most powerful programs for a man to take on. That wreaks havoc on your psyche in a lot of ways, where we just end up eating a bunch of stuff. And that processing that I had that was natural for me at that point trickled over to you, where you felt like you had to eat it. So by you saying that in that moment, it's like, I'm gonna either lose this woman that I feel like is my soulmate, is supposed to be my wife, or I'm gonna level up. I'm gonna put on my big boy drawers. And mind you, I'm already a spiritual leader of my community, but this is a blind spot just on a human level that I could not see until you said, I don't know if I could continue to do this. From that point, it didn't just automatically snap and I just got it all together. But from that point, progressively, gradually getting better, seeing more clearer, becoming more aware of the ways I could become a better mediator, the ways I could stand up for you, and not just be a situation where, well, my family already existed. So, and I never said it, but that's kind of the way I was unconsciously moving in my processing that had to change for you to continue to be around past that point. Had you not given that to me in that moment, we don't get to this side of things, which of course we'll get to in a little bit. But I think that was the first cog for me to see I need to be a bit better middleman, a better mediator in the situation, and to accommodate for what you are experiencing more than I currently am.
Yeah, I think a huge part was me, and this happens incrementally, because initially when things are just chaotic, and that's the thing, things were always peaceful with you and I. It was just when that element would be introduced,
Facts.
that it would somehow come and trickle down and affect us, because it would affect you emotionally, and then that would affect me emotionally. And so to a certain degree, I had to get to my own space and recognize, like, what boundaries would make me feel safer,
Right.
what boundaries would make me feel more comfortable. And then recognizing, just like, it's just small things. I get so many messages from women, like, how do you interact in that dynamic?
Right.
Because a lot of the people who follow us also followed you all.
Right.
And so there is curiosity in people who are in their own blended families and just unsure how to maneuver it. And so it just came with me acknowledging all the things, you know, that possibly made me feel uncomfortable, and figuring out how to bring that to your attention. And also one of the things I was working on is speaking up for myself.
Right.
It's something that I had not done in years. I just would always keep the peace and start the war within myself. And you really were like, no, tell me, let me know.
It was things you held for months before
absolutely.
I'm like, this happened? Like, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even, you know, things that she did or said to me that I never told you, because again, I was just trying to make sure y'all had at least, you know, even though the relationship was chaotic, it was still trying to make sure that I didn't add fuel to the fire.
Right.
So it was a lot of things that I didn't even tell you, because I didn't want you to feel like uncomfortable. I just wanted you to have a relationship with your son.
Right, no doubt.
And so even when it came to, you know, just things that happens in an argument, you know, bringing up things like, there's a difference between having a conversation about your son together, and then there's a different conversation when someone starts to bring up things that happened in the past relationship.
Right.
That's a boundary for me, because now we're talking about something different, you know, making decisions that I'm not included in.
Right. That was a big one.
That was a big one, you know. Those are certain things that it's not like, you know, oh, okay, we're about to do this. And I had to speak up for myself and say, no, I need to be a part of these conversations. I want to be a part of those conversations, because I won't allow myself to be a part of any dynamic that I feel left out or I feel like the third wheel in. And I also recognize that you were the middleman,
right?
That you were trying to please both sides, right? And I see this a lot in so many relationships. The man is in the middle, and the child's mom and the wife is, you know, going back and forth and beefing, even though I wasn't going back and forth, but there was still a lot of tension. So you're still trying to figure out how to maneuver, still trying to tell her and let her know, hey, you're not allowed to speak to her like that, and still trying not to ruffle feathers to a certain degree, so you do still have, you know, that, so your son doesn't feel that tension,
right?
And then also, you know, just coming to grips with not taking on the emotions that comes from her aspect. And it was many a times where I'm like, she's not allowed to treat you that way. Right. She's not allowed to speak to you that way. Like, that's not okay. That's manipulation. Like, that can't happen. And like, to a certain degree, making sure that our energy was still healthy, and our energy was still in alignment with what we said we were going to do, which was constantly healing, growing, and evolving. And so what I started to recognize was, I'm setting a lot of boundaries. Why? I feel very uncomfortable, very unsafe. Why? And I started to recognize I never spoke up for myself. And then it kind of led to all of the other times I've never spoken up for myself. In life in general. And then especially in past relationships where there was always an ex-girlfriend who found whatever reason to have an issue with me, and I never said anything. Right. I would let them blast me on Twitter, blast me on social media, which she ultimately did as well. And I would not say anything. I would just kind of be the bigger person, but I was still eating it. Right. It was still hurting my feelings. It was still confusing to me. And then even asking deeper, like, why does that bother you? Right. And then one of my childhood wounds is when people flip on me.
What you had an experience with early on?
Yeah, when they just kind of like shapeshift right in front of you. Like, one minute they're really cool, really nice, and then the next minute they change into a completely different person and treat you as if, you know, they've never met you before, and like you're a stranger and like you don't matter to them. That happened to me in high school, where I lost all of my best friends overnight.
In an instant,
yeah, overnight, over something that, you know, I didn't do. And so this brought up wounds of the fear of people in general. Not like the fear of a person, but the fear of people, like how they can really be one person one minute and be another person the next minute, and just continue effing with me. Right. You know, like poking me to the point it's like, are you trying to make me go off? Are you trying to, like, I've worked really hard on my anger, which brought up another wound. I didn't actually work on my anger. I figured out a very skillful way to suppress it. And this, so what she was doing, she was lashing out at me.
Right.
Lashing out at you too. But one thing that I acknowledged was, this girl ain't got no sense of like, calm down, don't do that, don't say that. She would just kind of like lash out to a point I almost admired it. And I was like, that is odd. Like, I've never seen people just do that. Like, obviously when people do that, they got to apologize later. But in the moment, I'm like,
in sports, we call that no conscience. When you miss 10 straight free throws and you just take the next 10, no conscience. And you're right. That's a beautiful aspect of freedom. It needs to be balanced. But yeah, you're right.
Right. So it was extremely unbalanced, but I still noticed it. No doubt. And so I noticed, how come I just don't go off on her?
Right.
You know, what within me is not allowing me to show up the way that I want to show up? Because even though I'm being graceful, I'm giving you passes, I'm understanding you're younger, I'm understanding trauma's present, I understand this is a new dynamic, and I understand that your son is meeting a new woman. I understand all of the many shifts and changes that not only she had to experience, you had to experience.
All of us in our different ways.
I had to experience, right? So I'm holding so much space, but the question is, how come I can't
do that?
Yeah, why? Like, what is that resistance within me which showed me that I did not actually heal the wound of anger? I was very skillful at repressing it.
Yeah.
And so there was just so many things that kept showing up that reminded me, hey, you should acknowledge this, or you should go back and pay attention to this, or you should nurture this. This is triggering this. Because I was constantly feeling some type of emotional trigger, which was really uncomfortable, but I never stopped allowing those triggers to guide me back to the home within myself.
Right.
And so that's how I came to the conclusion I'm supposed to be here. It was a confusing space at one point, because I was like, at some point it's necessary to learn the lessons, and then at another point, am I just taking myself through an unnecessary relationship that's just making me feel bad over and over again? And I had to recognize, no, I'm actually acknowledging a lot of my blind spots through her bad behavior, through us setting boundaries in this dynamic. I was still learning about myself. And that's the thing that I've always said. I want to passionately and intentionally heal, grow, and evolve. And so sometimes that happens through unhealthy dynamics and unhealthy relationships.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to with the soul roles. If you just look at what we just talked about on a purely human level, there's going to be a certain resistance to having that type of experience. But when your intention and what you communicate to the universe is, nah, I want the totality. I want to go to the highest levels of healing, where you're going to have certain dynamics that pieces of your humanity may say, I don't want to have to go through that, right? But if you wasn't getting a lesson on your own, if you was still suppressing and repressing the anger, and a lot of times these negative emotions, they get bad raps. Negative for me is more shadow than it being bad. I don't see anything in bad or good. But sometimes a conversation needs to be expressed with a certain amount of firmness, with a certain amount of raising your voice. Sometimes it's been moments where my son's mother has had to raise her voice at me for me to actually get it to click, and vice versa. It was a certain point I was doing the same thing, because I'm this meditation teacher and I need to be able to be calm through this whole situation. It's times where the message had to get across in the form of what somebody would call an angry moment that a meditation teacher is not supposed to have. But now we were opening ourselves up in our ability to communicate to this whole aspect of how to do that we were saying, no, that's not worthy enough for to be able to communicate through. We don't need anger. Sometimes you need anger to be the package. So this is kind of what I mean as far as the soul roles. When you look at already the lessons that we are exchanging, we all signed up for this in our own different ways, to not just be in this difficult, uncomfortable nuclear family situation. Marty is teaching, his mom is teaching, I'm teaching, Candace is teaching each other in ways that if you just look at it from a human level, you're not going to understand the universal divine chess that's being played to get all of us to level up. And that kind of so being in the position that she was in, and those who are in the position of, I guess, not being the middleman and being, I guess, on the outside looking in of your former mate going into a new relationship. I always talk about the fact that masculine dominant people, when we have unfamiliar emotions or experience rise up, there's two things that the masculine dominant energy does. The first thing is the alert goes off. The alarm system goes off. It deems uncomfortable, unfamiliar experiences, sensations, thoughts, emotions as threat, right? The second thing it does is it goes into computation, calculation. It tries to figure out how to not have that experience or that sensation come back into the body. So off top, boundaries are set. And if you're somebody that's on that end of the spectrum, maybe like she was in the beginning, there's going to be a warlike approach, whether you are conscious of it or not, whether you even feel like you are in that energy or not. And I see just off my experiences and what I've talked to some of my brothers, sisters too, about, I feel like there's certain phases to how that can kind of play out. So I put this as stages of building nuclear blended families, but this is specifically what I mean. If you're in that position where you are looking at a former partner go into a new relationship and what comes with that. So the first stage I feel like could go one of two ways. It could either be bitterness, or it could be like competitiveness. And what I mean by that is you don't want to look like you feel like you are the loser. Mm-hmm. You don't want to feel like you are the one that's going to create angst. You want to be in a rush to feeling like I'm cool. Yeah. What'd you say?
Make sure you're talking into the mic.
Yeah, you just want to feel like I'm cool. I have a certain level of balance about this situation that I want to be able to overtly display. I don't want to look like I'm hurt. And even if you're not hurt about the actual partner going into a different relationship, there's still traumas that got to be worked through whenever you separate from anybody. So a lot of times it'll be one of the two. That bitterness is going to go quickly into that negative space, the cattiness, all these different things. A lot of the times that competitiveness and that wanting to not look like you are bitter or that you are hurt, a lot of times it takes time for that to play itself out and the trauma to come to the surface. So I remember initially there was like a lot of forthright efforts from my son's mother to like really make this a dynamic, a unit and things of this nature. Over time, and that's kind of what you was talking about with the like 1 second is this, 1 second is that. Over time, it started to turn into her trauma coming back up, all of our traumas being included in this situation, rising to the forefront. And now it's not just a dynamic of wife, ex-girlfriend, son's mother. Now it's a dynamic of us reaching into childhood, what we've experienced in previous life cycles, what our soul needs us to reconcile. Now it goes way beyond the pot of just the nuclear family. And it's almost more difficult when it's not that bitterness off rip, because now your defense system comes down. It's like, oh, all right, it's lit. This is going to be a beautiful situation. Even my defense system came down to a certain degree off the first conversation we all had together. Like, this is going to be easier than I thought. And then the SHIT kind of hit the fan afterwards. So you may want to ask yourself, if you are in that position, what stage am I in right now? Am I in that complete overt bitterness and I'm just lashing out from rip? Or am I trying to be a little bit competitive with this situation? Not trying to match what my partner's doing with their new relationship, but just trying not to look like I don't have it all together yet. A lot of times that's a huge dynamic in the situation. I feel like the next phase is figuring out processing styles and communication styles. And processing styles is something that I got on my page. I believe I talked about it in a previous episode. But it's very important to know any individual that you want to have interaction with. It's very important to know how they handle disagreement. What is their particular style? Are they a yeller? Are they a shut downer? Are they a retreater? Are they an aggressive resolver? I got about 7 different components to the type of processing style somebody could be. It's very important to know what your son's mother or your child's father is. It's very important to know who the new partner is and what their processing style is. We got to start to be able to mix and match those understandings to know how to have communication through what are going to be a lot of uncomfortable moments and things that got to be talked through as a unit. When we had that conversation, when you helped me to set my boundaries, I understood from that point going forward, it's not a matter of Candace coming into my life and I already am a father. It's no, now we a unit. So if I'm about to go to the movies with my son's mother and my son, it's not about her being jealous or thinking I'm gonna do something with my son's mother. It's a matter of 4 to 5 hours, I'm gonna be 0 dark 30. That's not fair to not communicate to her, I'm about to, go here with my son, and not to send her a picture or just keep her in the loop of what's going on. These things need to be accommodated for, but I got to those through starting to understand the process and styles that was involved. Another thing is being able to separate emotion from the logistics. Now, you got to go through and confront the emotion itself to get the download. But ultimately, like I was saying, this is not about trying to appease what my son's mother thinks about me. This is about how we make this unit work to the degree it needs to, because not everything needs to work. They don't need to speak all day, every day for this situation to work. The first time Marty met Candace and vice versa, they fell in love with each other. Spent about a week and a half together at my place in Jersey. So from rip, they have had their own dynamic, their own relationship. It don't have to be perfection across the board. And a lot of times we expect that. We expect, well, if we're going to be at this event, why old girl ain't showing up? What? Did we discuss that? Do we agree that that's what works for everybody? So understanding those different parameters and being able to separate the logistics of the situation from how it feels to you. And then once you start to work through some of that, then a certain level of trust starts to arise. Not that you may not say no BS, not that you may not do or say something to hurt me in the future, but now we have a certain level of trust that we are all invested in the core intention, which is the child, and not getting in each other's way, right? Being able to have the type of family we are supposed to have together. From that comes the rhythm. Start to get a rhythm for how much we may need to talk. Like y'all to the point, and I'm about to hand it over to you. Y'all have had a few conversations that have been a lot more peaceful than what y'all have had in the past. Y'all still don't need to do that every day, but at least we have gone through the wars enough to get to the point where we realize, well, this type of exchange is something I'm open to, is something that works for us. And then you get to the openness to have new issues, which means just because y'all had a few beautiful conversations, it don't mean next week something else may not pop up. And I need to use my voice again, whether that's anger or peace or whatever it is. So just understanding these dynamics, I think, will always keep families blended or nuclear in a space where they have the capability to be able to work through whatever presents itself.
Yeah, and I want to touch on the reconciliation, but before that, because a lot of families have the notion that we just need to put our differences to the side for the child. Mm-mm. And yes and no. I don't subscribe to that simply because whatever you don't acknowledge, the child still feels. Mm-hmm. They still feel that energy. They still feel if you dislike one another. They still feel that tension. So their nervous system, everyone has an energetic field. Mm. We have our aura, we have our energetic field, and this energetic field extends at minimum a foot in front of us. Mm. And this is a direct design to help the body feel into safe environments. So a child does not need to hear an argument to know that argumentative energy is present.
Absolutely.
And so it's not enough to just put your differences to the side for the sake of the child, because they're going to feel it anyway. Mm-hmm. And then that's like when parents go into their room and they have a disagreement in the room and then they come out like nothing happened. Right. Kids feel that, okay? Kids are way smarter and more intuitive than we are, mm-hmm. because society hasn't programmed that out of them yet. So you cannot get over a child. That's why they think that they're smarter than adults, because they have that intuition that's like, that don't make sense. And so in our situation, we did not do that. We all, three of us, continually worked on our issues to make sure that when we're showing up, it's from an authentic space. Right. And initially, I don't feel she showed up authentically. I did my best to show up authentically. Then it became real fake because I was smiling when it wasn't nothing to smile about. Right. I was being cordial when I wanted to cuss. Right. And so I wasn't showing up authentically, and I wasn't able to show up in the dynamic authentically. And then when we started to have real conversations, then the love started to be present. Right. Well, not the love, but the tolerance started to be present. The patience started to be more present, and the understanding started to be more patient or present. Mm-hmm. And so I had to, get to a space to where I was like, I'm gonna speak my truth. I think what happened was you were in the process of moving to Houston, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna come to Houston too," and I was like, "You can come to Houston, but you ain't coming over here." You know, I believe in proper apologies if y'all ain't heard so far on the podcast. And so you mentioned to her, you know, before that happens, you need to have a real conversation with Candace. And so, you know, we were able to have a conversation, and I was able to hold her accountable on all the things, and be very clear on my stance and very clear on my boundaries and very clear how that type of behavior makes me feel unsafe, and it makes me feel like I have to protect myself. And she was able to hear my point of view. She was able to apologize. She was able to take accountability. And from then on, you know, things were still rocky at times, but there was a level of understanding.
Right.
There was still uncomfortable energy, but there was a level of understanding. And also what I recognized was, by my interaction with her, I had to learn how to pray for a softer heart.
Right.
Because and another thing that I recognize too is I don't have people in my life that make me feel uncomfortable. This was the first situation ever where I couldn't just throw a person away.
Right.
This was the first situation where I had to say, you know, typically if it's somebody that I don't vibe with, this would never be a person that I would have conversation with on my own.
Right.
But now I'm in a situation to where I do, and it's not really by my choice. So I had to figure out, how do I exist in this situation when I can't just throw the person away like I typically would, because I feel uncomfortable by their behavior. So the only way that I can continue to exist in that type of relationship is to pray for a softer heart.
Right.
And I recognized that I needed a softer heart, that it wasn't that hard for me to hold grudges. It wasn't that hard for me to not forgive someone. And I don't live in a world of forgiveness. I do think forgiveness comes from ego. So it's not my job to forgive or not forgive anybody. Right. But I don't want to hold grudges. I don't want to be practicing what I wish I would have said in the mirror, which is what I was doing. And so I didn't want to have that energy lingering in my body. I didn't feel like she deserved enough power to have that much energy lingering in my body. And I wanted to dissect, like, where did that come from? So even after our conversation and we were able to, you know, get on one accord, I still had to do more work in praying to have a softer heart. And that's another thing that I learned was, just because you choose to move forward, just because you choose to, quote unquote, forgive, pray for a softer heart, doesn't mean that residual emotional residue won't still surface. And so that was the part that was also confusing for me, because I had to figure out, what do I do with this residue?
Right.
And the residue is really, well, you need to, like, the practice that a lot of people love that you gave me was going outside to scream, to get that explosive energy out, to really start to work towards, the only way that I can be softer is not so I can go off on somebody, because I don't live my life like that. I don't want to be angry or go off on nobody, but there is still residual explosive energy that is in my body that I need to get out. And so just recognizing that this union was causing me to really dive deeper into the parts of myself that I was oblivious of. And then moving forward, us being able to have even more real conversations, for me to take accountability on acknowledging how her behavior helped me go into a lot of deeper spaces. So at this point, it's like, yeah, you was wilding, but thank you. And she's like, yeah, I was wilding. Thank you for holding space. And like, just recently, every time we speak, it's just like more layers uncovering. And just recently, we were able to get to a point to where we were having a good time on the phone, you know, laughing and asking one another for, you know, perspectives on situations, and no more hurt and pain being underneath it, and really just owning the fact that that was just a phase. We were all going through our phase of evolving in this situation in our own way. Everybody was hurt in the situation. I'm sure I didn't show up the best to her in certain moments. There's certain things that I could have done differently or better, or said differently or better. And so the soul aspect is the main part for me in these types of dynamics, is recognizing that when people come together and when it is uncomfortable, there is a moment to ask the question, is this even necessary for me to be a part of? Because sometimes it's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. There's sometimes where you are just in a very unhealthy dynamic and it's not necessary for you to be a part of. But if you have the capacity to step back, because I stepped back a lot, I took a lot of time, a lot of days where I'm like, I just need 2 days of silence,
Right.
so I can feel into how this makes me feel. When a person is reactionary, they don't have the ability to do that. They don't have the ability to see the soul. They just see the person and their unhealthy behavior. And so I had to take a lot of time to sit back and really see how all souls are being activated right now.
Exactly.
Every soul is like, oh, you need to acknowledge this. Yeah, I'm about to
Right.
get them with this one. And then you get a 5-page text message to your phone, which forces you to go deeper into yourself. And so the biggest thing with the relationships, the blended relationships, the blended families, is recognizing that if you are where you're supposed to be, all of the souls in this union is working for the betterment, for the healing and the evolution of one another. So there is a thank you, a level of gratitude that I have to have towards his son's mother, because if it wasn't for her, I can name about 5 things off rip, things that I haven't even spoken about on this podcast yet, that showed me more of myself, areas of myself that still needed nurturing from my childhood. Same with you and same with her. There's many things that she expressed to me as well. And so when you are able to stop acknowledging the human that's just making you feel emotionally triggered, and then you're able to see the soul that is giving you the greatest gift and showing you how to go deeper within yourself so you can fulfill your soul's mission of constantly evolving, then it becomes a very beautiful dynamic.
Absolutely. And you get to the point where it's just that gratitude that exists throughout it, even in the moment. We've had moments where, talking about certain situations like, yo, I'm thankful that happened. I'm thankful this quote unquote war even came up. And I remember one time I went to see Marty. When I go to Jersey for extended periods of time, I get the Airbnb so me and him could just be together as much as possible. And he needed to get to school by a certain time. I forgot what happened the night prior, but I had already reached out to his teacher, letting her know he probably gonna be about an hour and a half late. Is that okay? She said, no problem. So I had communicated that to Marty's mom, but she was busy getting his clothes together, stuff like that. She probably didn't see it. So make a long story short, she came the next day expecting me to bring him out for them to take him to school at a certain time. Me and him in there asleep. Based on the plans I had already made, I made all the accommodations. So when I wake up, I'm waking up to getting blasted, right? Her mom, everybody calling me, where are you? What are you doing? And, I got him together. He got to school and everything happened how it needed to. But I was able to sit on the bed, not go into a text war with her. And mind you, the energy was explosive, right? And when I finally talked to you a few hours later, I was fine. I told you about the dynamics of what had happened. But I had to sit with that energy. Once Marty had left, I'm in the stillness of the Airbnb for a good 30 minutes. I'm doing breath work. I'm doing the necessary process, a mediator in some of these moments. And this is the thing with men. Y'all don't want to tap in. A lot of times we don't want to tap into our feminine energy. And you don't acquire these skill sets to be able to have a moment like that, knowing you didn't do anything wrong, and have that fire in your belly for 30 minutes and have to actually give all of your attention to allowing that emotion to matriculate out without turning it into, well, why can't you see what I said was right? Why can't you give me the benefit? It don't matter if I got the benefit of the doubt. It don't matter if she's blasting me or not in that moment. I know what happened. I'm good with that, and I also gave the energy, the emotion, its time, its space to be able to be here while it was here and drop itself off. And when I got to the end of it, I was able to just sit there and laugh like, yo, I could not do this without this turning into 3-4 days of texting back and forth, low key, not trying to handle the situation, but trying to get her to see I'm a good guy. I took care of things. It wasn't about that. It was no longer about that for me in that moment. And that was one of the times it was like, yo, thank you for every time where it went the other way. So you kind of all become gurus to each other within these dynamics. And when we can look at things through that prism, it's no longer a matter of who's right, who's wrong. It's what's to be learned. What are you actively or unconsciously teaching me in this situation? And that may not come in the initial exchange. Y'all may still end up arguing. Y'all may still end up becoming angry or whatever has to happen. But you still have that onus in the back of your mind once you remove yourself from the situation. Okay, what is the soul role lesson in this moment? And once you got that, now it's warp speed for everybody involved in these blended nuclear families to be able to evolve even faster.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also it's just the really being mindful of how you want to move forward. Because how we all started our relationship together was unhealthy. It was unbalanced, I'll say. There was things that needed nurturing, things that needed tweaks, systems that were in place that were not the healthiest systems. And so even the aspect of you no longer having to defend yourself with her and being more comfortable with not having to do that, and us all getting to a place of none of that is necessary. There's going to be moment to moment where something comes up. But outside of that, allowing love to be present, allowing peace to be present. I'm not used to being a part of situations with people to where like one day we good and then, probably 5 days we good. And then one day we get into it. So I'm still learning that process. Y'all do that very well. I'm still learning that process because I would be like, no, I just ain't gonna talk to this person no more. I ain't gotta deal with this. And so I'm still learning that process of how not to throw a person away, and seeing how obviously you guys have to be connected through your son, but it still is a picture to me to see how to talk your way through situations, to not just throw a person away because you see things differently and you respond to things differently.
To have an emotional snapback, I guess, if you will, because, sometimes it'd be those moments where, me and her kind of get into it, say what we got to say, leave it at that, and we are to the point where we kind of know how to do that with each other. And the next day, Marty and all of us is on the phone and we cracking up. Like nothing just happened the day prior.
Yeah.
So that is a skill set that starts to develop the more understanding, the trust, the willingness to work through things and to acknowledge the soul role lesson that's present. That malleability, I guess, emotionally, that ability to snap back starts to come. And now the arguments, when they do arise, it's not a end of the world type of thing. The moments where you feel, and these weren't arguments, but when you used to say, I need a couple days to just be in my space to figure things out. Had I not got to a certain level at that point of letting things be what they need to be, right? But also not carrying a fear. And there was still a possibility that after 2 days, you're like, nah, this don't work. And some of that energy and thoughts will be going through my mind, but I had done enough work to give you the 2-3 days whenever you needed them to face the fear of you possibly leaving, but not chasing. Are you good yet? Can we talk about it? Not trying to push you to what's comfortable for me to get to the end of your 2 days and say, okay, I'm still here. You got to be open with the fact that all of this could disintegrate tomorrow, right? If that's what needs to happen, I'm open to that shift and change as well. But as long as I'm maxing out and letting go, like I always talk about, then you'll always be where you're supposed to be, whether that's continuing to be in the dynamic or not.
Yeah, and I think I spoke with someone a while ago, and she was like, he really protects you in this space, and just, acknowledging how you were in the middle, but you still made sure you protected me. And you never spoke badly about her. And you just tried to find the healthiest way while also saying the things that needed to be said. And when I speak to certain women, they're like, my husband or my boyfriend, they never step in for me. They let their son's mom treat me any kind of way. They let her speak to me any kind of way. They have no boundaries. They pick her up. They do this. Like, they have no opportunity to say no. And I'm the one that kind of has to deal with it. And so when I was able to, express like, no, he does this, he does that. And she was just like, I've never experienced that. I've never even seen that. And so the fact that you had the capacity to remain the middleman, but also make sure and heard me because most people are like, no, I got to do what I got to do. You're going to make my situation worse.
Right.
And you were like, nah, I have to do what I have to do, but I want to make sure my wife's taken care of. I want to make sure she feels safe. I want to make sure my son's mother knows what it is, but also that she knows that this is not an environment that she has to fight anyone, that my son feels safe. Everyone feels safe in the environment. And it wasn't just about me. And then, you know, you having that balance of knowing when it's time to take a look at the foundation, when it's time to take a look at the boundaries. What I realize is a lot of men or women, whatever side it's on, they don't have boundaries with their ex-spouse that has the child. They have absolutely no boundaries, and it's extremely unbalanced, and it's unhealthy, and it forces the new person that comes in to figure out their way in that. And I think that is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I could have with the partner that is in the middle, to make sure that they find an area that they can find balance, that they find ways to make sure that boundaries are in place, and that they have these constant communications, open communication with their new partner and with the child, the mother or father of the child, and figure out healthy ways to make this dynamic work. And obviously this is speaking about people who are open and willing to try to make it work. Now, obviously, we all had the idea to want to make it work, but certain trauma step in the way, and then, you know, certain people respond a certain way, and it backtracks you a little bit. But to a certain degree, everybody wants the same thing in our union.
Was still present.
Yeah, everyone wants the same thing in our union. And so I think the best advice for the person in the middle is to just find healthy boundaries as much as you can. You definitely don't want to alienate your new partner, and you definitely don't want to disrespect the partner, the ex-partner. And the other aspect of advice is, if you are the new person going into the relationship, know your boundaries. Know when it's time for you to step in. Know when it's time for you to say something. His arguments that he has with his son's mother, I'm not texting her because I think she's wrong or nothing like that. What they experience is between them, and a huge aspect is me having to learn how to let that go. That's not my cross to carry.
Even in times where you wanted to be able to defend me, no doubt.
Absolutely. There's many times where I wanted to be able to defend you, and I had to acknowledge that if I truly want to maintain my peaceful life, then that's not my cross to carry. I don't have any kids, and I don't have a ex-partner that I have kids with. So this is not an argument that I have to be a part of. And the only other aspect that I needed to do was make sure that my husband was okay to a certain degree. And that didn't even look like taking on your emotions for you. No. That just looked like the reminder of, you too good of a man to be spoken to that way, you know, or this is manipulation, or this is not okay. You were not wrong in this situation. But never in putting myself in the midst of their family argument, their family dynamic. That respect still has to be there, that family dynamic of communication, because they need to come to whatever terms of agreement on their own. If they supposed to be beefing for the next 2 years, then that's up to them. That's how they're soul to interact. But if they choose to become best friends tomorrow, which they both want, I don't care what she say. She love him, and she want to be his friend much, right? She wants to be his friend. It's just the uncovering of the trauma. So even right now, they're on great terms. But soon, I believe, because I know that she's doing very beautiful work, they are going to be great friends again when it's naturally supposed to get there. And then being that new person, allowing that relationship to maintain its form, and encouraging. I remember it was a time when y'all were in the midst of whatever y'all were going through, and y'all hadn't hugged. And I remember I was talking to her on the phone, I'm like, get that man a hug. He loves you. You know what I'm saying? So there are aspects of your relationship with her that have absolutely nothing to do with me. Said that. Yeah, absolutely. Because y'all friends. Like, y'all met on a friendship level. So my job is to always advocate for myself and my needs, obviously, but understanding that these souls, him, his son's mom, and his son, they have a specific dynamic that don't have nothing to do with me. They have a soul contract that has nothing to do with me. Yes, at some point it includes me, but I have to also, and I want to also respect their individual soul's contract and the fact that I may not be included in those parts. And that is completely fine. That is completely okay. So when their relationship evolves, when it takes a couple steps back, it's not my job to jump in that, because on the soul level, I understand that everything is happening exactly how it's supposed to happen, because everybody's growing. She is flourishing right now. His son's mom, she's flourishing right now. She's very
doing tremendous work.
Absolutely. Yeah. She's very clear on, the areas that need more work. I'm flourishing. I'm very clear on the areas that need more work. Same with my husband. So our dynamic as a threesome, no pun intended, our dynamic as a threesome is not about the human aspect anymore. Even it at first was necessary to get caught up in that because we had to grow from it. But now it's more clear that this is a soul level threesome dynamic, and that we have to respect whatever the contract is. I have a contract with her on a soul level. She did her job. Well, okay. God dog it. She did her job well. She cracked me open in ways that I've nobody's been able to touch me, right? She's told me before, until you entered the picture, I wasn't even able to cry. So these are aspects of soul level dynamics that are imperative to happen. And when you are the new person coming in, understand that these contracts were already written. So there's a level of respect and a level of boundaries that need to be had so they can continue to fulfill their mission, even if that doesn't include you.
And the advice you was given as far as the male mediator, whoever's the mediator, a lot of times when people are masculine energy dominant, to shift, to change things, you got to exert a lot of force, because you don't have the tact of the feminine energy to be graceful, to see things from a different perspective, to function in the gray area as opposed to the angularness of just black and white. So you exert a lot of energy. There's going to be a lot of screaming and arguing for men to get, their children's mother to just understand where they're coming from, or the same thing with the women. But when you are in that space, when you come along and you let me know, for me to continue to be here, you got to figure out a certain level of boundaries, right? There was a certain part of me that felt like, but damn, I'm exerting all this energy and you still telling me it's not enough.
Right, yeah.
That energy was present, but I just had enough space and wherewithal to understand that the energy was present, but let me look at every dynamic of the situation. And when I looked at it, you was absolutely right. And I saw something I never saw before. And not just my interaction with my son's mother. In all my previous relationships with women, I was not speaking up for myself or not doing it effectively enough. So if you are that person in the middle, you got to do whatever work you got to do. Get with a counselor, Candace, myself, or whoever you feel comfortable with, to unlock that skill set where you can receive an uncomfortable truth about something you feel like you're giving 100% energy to, but your efficacy may be at 50%. Yeah. Right. So when they tell you that it's not a matter of woe is me, end of the world, I'm not doing enough, you don't acknowledge the effort. None of that exists. It's like, I know I'm maxing out, but this is like Phil Jackson tell Michael Jordan, hit the block a few more times, as opposed to just blowing by your man. It's just those little game plan shifts that this is what it's more so about. So if you're in that position, develop that skill set to be able to separate the two. The other aspect you talked about.
Can I touch on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Don't forget what you was about to say. The other aspect is the new wife or the new girlfriend or the new husband or the new boyfriend, whatever the case is. In the moments where I would suggest to set a boundary or let you know what I needed and what type of boundary would make me feel better as a part of this unit. And then those moments where the feeling of I'm not doing enough will come up. I had to learn to also remind you that it's not that you're not doing enough because you were doing everything. Right. It's that I'm growing more in this dynamic, so and I'm realizing new things, and I'm updating my boundaries as I go. I'm updating my needs as I go. Point. At first, in the beginning, it was like, oh no, picking up, taking out of work is okay. And then as I continue to upgrade my boundaries, I'm like, I need you to start having a conversation with me to ask me how that makes me feel.
Right.
That's an update. And boundaries is not saying that you're doing anything wrong, and it's not saying that you weren't maxing out on not doing anything. It was just saying that I was changing and evolving in what I needed, and then I was asking you to continuously adapt.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of like us adapting together as I realized, no, I need something else.
Right.
I need something more. I need something different. And so being that new person in the dynamic, making sure you're not making your partner feel like, because I know a lot of women will say, oh, you let her do this, or you do that, or you do this, or you do that. And they don't say, that did work for me in the beginning. I did accept that in the beginning, and I thought I felt okay with it in the beginning. But now, as I'm growing in our dynamic, I think I need something different. I think I need something more. And that doesn't mean that you haven't been showing up perfectly, or it doesn't mean that you haven't been implementing my suggestions or doing the things that you know could make us flow in a better state. It just means that right now, I think this is going to help us level up even more than we already have. And so you never want to dismiss your partner's efforts.
And that brings up another point too, because in every one of those level up moments, when you get to a new tier of understanding of yourself and your needs, these are signposts. 2 months in, 3 months in, 6 months in, when new versions of yourself are arising, you express the need. Now, the person who you're expressing it to, the partner, they have to choose. Do I want to accommodate that? Do I have the capability to accommodate that? Do I have the willingness? If not, that's okay. Y'all may have realized we've come to the end of this particular train. If they do, then it's just a matter of, okay, how am I going to go about making these adjustments? And I wasn't in it by myself in those moments. As soon as I communicated, I see that. I have the willingness. Now we can help each other. You can guide me in specifically how to do that for myself. I can express to you what I need to express. So these things aren't end of the world necessarily. They are those signposts at different parts of the relationship. Once again, letting you know, yeah, we still supposed to be here. We just got to make some shifts, or it's time to, do different things.
Yeah.
Neither of which is a bad thing at the end of the day. Because I tell my couples, clients, when I do couples therapy, I'm not here to keep y'all together.
Absolutely.
I'm here to do my due diligence to bring the truth and things y'all may not see to the forefront. And sometimes that results in people going their separate ways, but they do so from a level of understanding, I'm not really happy here right now, and my soul needs me to do something different. So it's kind of that same situation. And I did remember the other part that you were suggesting, as far as people that are in your position, to be able to separate. It's like the same task but a different end of it. To be able to separate, being able to walk me through some of these moments, to be a voice to listen, an ear to listen, and a voice to springboard ideas off of, while also not taking on my emotion. That's a skill set that also needs to be developed. You can't just have the intention and all of a sudden you do that, because again, you love this individual that you see going through it. And especially with women, y'all have an even wider bandwidth of emotion where y'all feel even more from us most times, and y'all are very protective of us. So it may be to the point where you realize, I don't have that capability yet. You're going to have to develop that, or even just that inability is going to turn into him feeling pressure to hurry up and figure it out, or to shield you like I was kind of doing in the beginning from what I was feeling, and having 2-3 day gaps of us not talking. You're not going to be able to get past that hump if you don't figure out, whoever, man or woman in Candace's position, how to guide your partner, help them through while not getting consumed in what they feel. That's a skill set that has to be developed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think off rip, that was something that we were pretty much good at. Mm-hmm. There may have been moments where there may have been moments where like something happened towards you.
What you laughing at?
I was laughing because I was thinking about the time I had just got out of surgery, and y'all got into it about something. I was like, I ain't never talking to her again. I went and blocked her on like all my platforms and stuff. And just recognize, I was thinking of that because I was thinking of, when did I not be able to perform in a healthy way? And so there are moments where obviously someone's going to respond in a way or feel a way that's like, no, that's not right. It shouldn't happen that way. But I think as the partner coming in, we have to be reserved in such a way, because if he's already emotionally feeling something, he wants to have a healthy relationship with his kid, and he has to go through another person to manage this relationship. It's co-parenting. It just has to happen. And so as the new person coming in, you cannot explode while your partner is also trying to maintain their emotions. It's like when someone's in a hospital and they don't know what's happened, and you walk in and you crying, and it's like, oh my God, the person on the hospital bed feel like they dying now. It's like, oh my God, it's bad. And so you know what I'm saying? And so it's like if your partner is trying to open for real.
It's bad.
Yeah. And so if your partner is openly trying to allow you in to this dynamic, they aren't saying, what should I go tell her? That's not what he's saying. He's not asking me for advice in that way. He's just, I'm his wife. So he's just openly speaking to me about what the experience is. And so I have to be clear enough to, one, not allow how I feel to bleed into this conversation, because it ain't about how I feel. Yes, how I feel as is valid, but this is their situation, and I have to step back enough to allow it to be their situation. I have to also make sure that I am a clear sounding board to my husband, because because also I don't want to give, if I'm already mad at her for something she did to me, I don't want to be like, yeah, you need to tell her this, and then he go back and tell her, and that's not healthy. It's not right. Like, I handle my personal situation with her, and his situation is different. So when I'm now just being a sounding board to my husband, I have to come to that situation like me and her was best friends. Like, I have all the love in the world for her. I have all the love in the world for them, and I want them to figure it out. Now it's time for us to be mindful of the betterment of the child, because how I guide my husband is also going to either amplify what he already feels, or is going to calm what he already feels. I don't want to amplify nothing within him. I definitely don't want to amplify anything that's going to tarnish their relationship. So I have to make sure I'm the clearest channel possible, so I can show up for my husband in the best way needed, and not amplify situations and make them worse. And now he's going into a conversation emotionally charged based on what I say. That's not right. And so as the person coming in, you got to let all of that go. You're going to have to really have the skill set of, what does my husband need from me right now? He needs a clear channel. He needs an emotionally safe channel. He needs a protective channel. And he needs a channel that is only going to guide him with any advice that comes from God, not from my ego, not from my woundedness, not from my place of pain, not from my place of anger. Asking him, do you want me to share? Is this a situation where you want advice? Do you want me to just listen? How can I show up best? I ask my husband all the time, what do you need from me? Because I may not know what to say. I may not know how to show up. And I don't want to say anything that is not conducive to the situation. So it is a huge skill set.
And like, when you are doing this work as individuals, as the adults in the families, this all trickles over into our ability to be able to parent. In all the different capacities, me being the father parent, my son's mother being a mother parent, you being the ancillary supportive parent, because you parent when you are with Marty. Like, you do all the same different things, the stuff that I do as well. But as we've been talking, I even see where the soul roles and continuing to recalibrate them will teach you how to love people beyond niceness or meanness, beyond duality. Case in point, like you said, I have never, when I used to do lives and talk about what I was learning through our separation and recalibration, I have never said one negative thing by my son's mother, I never will. I still got tremendous respect, even in the time she was pissing me off to no end, and probably vice versa. Still got tremendous respect, love. I want to genuinely see her do good because I still see the best in her. I know a lot of the trauma that she's been through, she didn't deserve at a human level, but that's what her soul requested, and it's tough, right? So with that being said, there was still this aspect of me that wanted to show up for her in ways beyond co-parenting. Just checking on her mental well-being. How you doing? And if she was at a certain point where she would say she was going through a rough moment, all right, I'm about to come get you on Marty. Let's go to the overlook. Let's go to the forest and just, nature bathe or whatever it is. It got to a point where I realized I can no longer function in that capacity. It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for you. And there was a version of us where your soul needed me to pour information into you. Me being further along in my journey, me being older than her, there was a lot of things that her soul was requesting, was thirsty for information and knowledge from me. But it got to a point where it hit a wall. And it didn't matter how much information I could give to the community. She ain't want that from me. Her soul no longer needed that from me. It took me a while to figure out that now I'm just this stale voice in the back of her mind. And it don't matter how great the information is or my intent to want to see her do well. I've reached my capacity at trying to be her friend at this stage of it. When I finally did realize that, when I realized I can't do the checkups right now, I can't hug you either right now. I can't take you to the overlook if you're having a stressful day. It gotta just be about Marty. Taking that distance and not being bogged down by, well, this is what a father's supposed to do to keep the none of that mattered no more. I heard the call of what her soul was needing from me, and it was for me to scale back. Me, somebody that used to suffer from savior syndrome and wanting to fix and help everybody, I had to cut that off and say, you know what? This is the dynamic that best suits what your soul is asking me of. Now we are to a point where we are reestablishing a friendship and redeveloping trust to see if we can get back to that point, and I do believe we will. But it's still a lot of beautiful moments we have in understanding that has to be rebuilt in a different way with completely different versions of ourselves as opposed to what we met when we was beautiful friends before anything that happened that brought Marty here even transpired. So you got to be able to understand what the soul role lessons are teaching you, but you got to be willing to make those adjustments. And what started as friendship, that went to romance, that went to family, it's going to continue to be the chess, but you got to be willing to accept the changes as they happen and understand it's not your responsibility or role to push anybody along. And it's I think probably the last point I need to make. I'm not Marty's dad. Like, I'm his dad, I'm not his parent. And what I mean by that is life is our parents. We are the chalk, if you will. We are this day and age, they got the laptops and all of that. But life is teaching us what we need to learn. Our parents are the main conduits that will establish the foundation for us to get to the point where we can accept and be conscious of, I need to learn my lessons through life. When you relinquish that title that you need to be the one teaching him everything and raising him in every aspect, shape, or form, it's certain ways that they raise him that I don't do. I had to be okay with. That's what he needs to learn from, not even just them, but from life. I'm very strict in my diet. When he with me, he already know what time it is. He may have a Dorito. He may have a Reese cup, and I'm not going to go to war over these things because I understand I don't own his journey, even being his father. I don't own my son's mother's journey just because we was together. I don't own my wife's journey just because she's my wife. There's no ownership in any way, shape, or form, and I trust life for life to do what it's supposed to do and knows how to do. So just understanding that to a certain degree, you are not even your child's parent. You are the conduit of the parent that is life. That helps you to let go in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and one, the point that you made about like stepping back as far as like the savior syndrome, and that's what a lot of people don't really understand is when you do step in to constantly help a person, we have to acknowledge, like, where is that help coming from? Most of the time it is coming from the savior syndrome, the wanting to be loved, the wanting to be liked, the wanting to be seen a certain way. And then there's the other person who just has the kind heart. But when you step in to help someone in a situation that they are not meant to be helped in, you rob them of their opportunities to heal, grow, and evolve. And it's just like the butterfly. If you help a butterfly out of its cocoon before it expands naturally out of its cocoon, it doesn't even have the ability to now fly freely because it didn't develop the strength in its wingspan to be able to fly. It doesn't have the ability to be able to survive and adapt to environments. So we have to remember that when it comes to people as well, we have to give them the ability and the space to experience the full spectrum of their trauma, the full spectrum of their anger, the full spectrum of them lashing out, even if that's what it looks like. Yes, we take ourselves out of that equation. We have to also know the boundary. This is as far as I'm willing to go with you. This is as far as I have the capacity to go with you. But people are allowed to express themselves however they need to express themselves in their process without us interrupting in that. And the last part that you mentioned about you are not Madi's dad, and that matters because it just goes down to the trust that everything is already perfect. And these situations really allow us to flourish if we are not stuck in utilizing and looking at it from a human dynamic. If you get stuck in that human dynamic, you're going to feel all the human emotions. You're going to feel all the human perspectives, perceptions, anger, and you can possibly get stuck there because that's what humans do. They recycle the same thoughts, the same emotions, and then they release hormones and they get stuck and addicted to those same thoughts, emotions, and thought processes, the same arguments. That's why you replay them same arguments in your head when you go into the restroom. You're looking in the mirror like it's the person that you wish you cussed out. Trust me, I know, I've been there. And so when it comes to us looking at it from a human dynamic, you're going to get all the things that come with being a human. The purpose of being a human is to be able to transmute those things and transcend out of those things and then see it from a soul point of view. People love to talk about the higher self and the lower self. This is your opportunity to practice that. This is your opportunity to practice the higher self. This is your opportunity to decide, if I was my best self, how would I show up in this situation? How would I respond to a situation like this? Would I get emotionally involved, or would I practice understanding that this person is experiencing a lot of different transformations right now? And it may not even be for me to respond. Maybe they need to go off. And maybe there's a part of me that may need to be triggered, but I don't have to attach to that trigger. I can just watch that trigger be present. I can watch that wave go by and allow this person to express themselves however they need, because they're just practicing being their own level of human. But on a soul level, everybody's doing exactly what they need to do for the betterment of this dynamic, and so everybody can heal, grow, and evolve.
And I think this is where the child guru is able to come to the forefront. Being that we have given so much effort and done our due diligence, myself and my son's mom, to know where we're supposed to be in that soul role capacity, and we've been doing a much better job. Every day we've gotten better at it. But now Madi is able to feel the clarity from both sides to express what he needs in the different ways he's going to express it to me, as opposed to his mom. Case in point, the example I give, like Madi is a lot like me temperamentally in a lot of ways. I need order, I need structure, I need timeliness, and these types of things to exist in peace. So he needs the same things. And of course, it's a lot more going on in the environment that he lives in with my son's mother. She got to juggle a lot of different things. What her father is going through, her sister, she's still being a mother to a lot of her family in a lot of different ways. So it's a lot going on, and I understand the situation. It's probably a little easier for me to keep order and structure and be on time to certain things. So at a certain degree, me and her had to have a conversation about his temperament being different when he's with her. Like I hardly ever see Madi wild out. And of course there's something to be said for the fatherly dynamic. There's just a certain assertiveness in my voice without me even having to yell that he's going to respect a little bit more. I understand that. But we had to have a conversation where we had to talk our way through to some of the dynamics that initially she felt a little defensive in hearing, but we was able to get to the point where we understood that Madi is saying, being that he's like turning up on you in some of these moments, part of what Madi may be saying is, I don't want to rush to school, right? I don't want to wake up with only an hour to get to school. he kind of was expressing through his behavior, I need a little bit more structure and order and predictability in our schedule.
Yeah, because kids, their behavior reflects their
Absolutely,
environment.
absolutely. So it was tough in the moment, but she was able to hear me out. She was able to take some of my suggestions and start to employ them, and she was able to see, like, it didn't take care of everything, but it tapered off tremendously as far as how he was behaving with her when I wasn't around, just by making these subtle shifts. If we aren't in a space where we're honoring our soul roles and our capacities, Marty doesn't feel the clarity from both ends to be able to express that in the ways he does, and then we aren't as parents able to come together and figure out a game plan to support him in his request of what he needs, and the adjustments aren't able to be made if everybody is not honoring their role in these different ways. So you get to the point where it's no longer the pressure of we got to figure it out as parents. Now the information, the data from your child comes to the forefront, and he or she can tell you, this how I need to be raised. Stop trying to figure it out for me. I'm here to tell you how to help me do that. So all these things come to the forefront.
Yeah, they do. And I think, in our dynamic, everybody is and has done a very good job in trying. Because easily, a lot of people, I have friends who are like, my son's mother has never even wanted to have a conversation with me. Like, I don't even know where she lives. I don't know what her voice sounds like. I've had many friends where the dad is like my son's mom, or, my girlfriend is like, I don't want to have nothing to do. Just go get your kids and come, see me. And so for us to have the dynamic that we do, I think is really beautiful and a testament to our intentionality in our healing and the intentionality in our growth. And that is something that has to be present, because all three of us have been very intentional in trying to continue to show up differently and doing our best to take accountability, doing our best to acknowledge things we can do differently or better, so we all can like each other. It's one thing to have that soul level love, but people that you have to interact with, you want to like them to a certain degree
and enjoy their company.
And I do feel like all three of us can do that.
Absolutely.
I definitely enjoy like our moments where I have the ability to talk to her and it's not about our dynamic. Like when we just can it can just be like a natural conversation. I'm like, okay, this is what I was hoping for, and that is my last point. Is initially I'm all like, oh my God, it's about to be a blended family. Like I'm crunk, you know what I'm saying? I'm like excited about what the possibilities are. I'm excited about the positive aspects, and when I show up in spaces, I show up with all love. And so my expectation, and not even an expectation, it was a hope. I was excited and hopeful that we could be something that was extremely healthy. And I think what hurt me the most is when I realized it was like, this is not going to happen for us. It's like, it was super disappointing and it was confusing. And I had to step back and acknowledge everybody ain't there yet. Everybody ain't trying to be this happy-go-lucky family yet. Everybody doesn't have the capacity yet. And this is all built on your idea of what you wanted. You ain't ask everybody else what they wanted. You know what I'm saying? Or if they even had the capacity to go there. And so I had to step back and accept it for what it was, decide if I had the capacity to be a part of it for what it was, and give myself permission to pray for a softer heart and to trust that it was going to unravel and evolve exactly how it was supposed to. So now we're able to have beautiful conversations, and it's still a different dynamic, but it just comes back to the house. It comes back to our love Bible. It comes back to us being able to choose to have a dynamic that works best for us, not following any status quo, not following any societal norms, any societal timelines. We're now able to really hone in on our family dynamic, our blended nuclear family dynamic, and do exactly what works best for us.
Yeah, a wise man once told me, your lineage is the umbilical cord connecting you from your current self all the way back to what you were before you took form. So your great granddaddies, your great grandmommies, when you go all the way back down your ancestry, at a certain point, there were no people yet. There was just energy. There was just divine force. So our lineage is our story from this version of God's expression that we call me all the way back before any of us took shape and form. So when you do this work within the blended family, within the nuclear family, within your family at large, it's not just romantic. It's stuff that y'all dealing with cousins and uncles and nephews and all this stuff where these things need to be reconciled. You start to get more of the story of yourself, your DNA. A lot of the dis-ease, the sickness that we experience can be recalibrated via having these conversations, via mending these relationships. One of the reports I just got from the doctor yesterday was about something I'm experiencing that more than likely had nothing to do with anything that docs did. Mm-hmm. This is more so a genetic DNA type of thing, and I didn't have a say in it in this current expression of my soul. But whoever was doing whatever they was doing to have me have this situation now or be healing through it, that's still me. It was a different version of my soul. So all these relationships, when they are reconciled, you get more information on how to heal every single layer of yourself. Yeah. It can't just stop with the baby mom, with the wife, with the daughter or son. Heal all your friendships, all your relationships. Heal that lineage.
Yeah, don't rest on being triggered. Don't rest on being angry. Really give yourself permission to dissect that. One of my favorite quotes is dissect your demons and find out what they're feeding on. And people love to heal in isolation, and that's beautiful and it's great.
Right.
You spend a lot of time in isolation. Right. I spend a lot of time in isolation for my healing. But you recognize that when other people are added to that equation, it speeds up your process. And a lot of people rest on just being angry or mad at a person, and they don't acknowledge that this person is giving them a gift to go deeper. So definitely continue to dissect those areas of your being. Yeah.
So in closing, that's episode 8. June is sold out for our healing retreat in Tulum, Mexico. So we appreciate all y'all that have shared, whether you signed up or not. Every bit of energy y'all gave to that. June is sold out. July is on its way. We got a few spots left for July 6th to the 10th. Hit us up ASAP before those spots are taken. And then October 13th to 17th, our couples retreat is still wide open. We got a lot of slots for that. Those will probably sell out in a matter of time as well. So just do your due diligence. Weekly meditations with myself every Sunday virtually from wherever you are in the world. Y'all can work with me to help develop the skill set to do some of the things we've been talking about emotionally and energetically. Counseling is still available, one-on-one, familial, and couples therapy. You still accepting clients right now, too?
Yeah, I'm still accepting one-on-one clients. If you need help, just going through the emotional process, needing someone to help guide you through that process, and having the ability to uncover and identify what traumas are actually present. Because most people that I talk to, they have no idea what's wrong. They just know that they need help. I help you identify what those traumas, wounds are, and then give you a game plan on how to work through that. The other aspect is, we talked about the retreat. Oh, my book. My book will be coming out in March. I'm working through it and writing it diligently every day, all day, in the morning, late at night. So y'all just stay on the lookout for that as well.
Y'all getting more of her than me right now. So make sure you appreciate that book and all the effort she put into it. You want to tell them the title?
Do I want to tell them the title? I don't know.
It sounds like you don't want to tell them the title yet, so we just going to chill.
Yeah, I'll tell y'all the title later. Let me get it together first.
And then somewhere around that time frame, relaunch.
Yes. Oh, I almost forgot. So the SASHA Flowers skincare will also be relaunched. I started my journey of entrepreneurship with my skincare in 2020. And so it took off so fast that I didn't have the ability to do anything. I didn't have the ability to market. I didn't have the ability to create a brand. I was just trying to play catch up with thousands and thousands of orders. And so now I have the time and I have the creative energy and the creative flow to really sit still and honor how I want to create, honor the energy that I want to put into these products, the energy that I want you to feel when you put these products on your face, on your skin, on your body. And so the SASHA Flowers will also be launching, if not in March, early April, January, March, April. Yeah, I have to go through that.
I think that's it. And if y'all haven't already, check out episode 1 through 7. Like, rate, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff we gotta say.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you're on YouTube, definitely do that. And if you're on Instagram, share it. You can always screen record it, share it to your story, share it to your page, share it with your friends. A lot of what we do is based on people being able to hear us. So that means that it does require you to also, tell your friends about us and support us. That's what support looks like. You may not always need to have a session from us. You may not always need to go to meditation or want to go to meditation or emotional alchemy or the yoga course that we have. But you want to still support. And so sharing our things as much as you can brings us to another audience of people that may actually need our services. That helps us and that helps the collective in general. So yes, please support and just continue to repost and share.
Right. So low key, you going beyond supporting us, you supporting the conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of these conversations are not being had, and you supporting the global community that we are being able to build via your support. So signing off, that's all we got. That was probably a long one, right? But it was necessary.
I think we probably like a couple minutes over. Normally we do like 1:30, 1:45. We had 1:53.
Okay. All right. Y'all got a lot this time. So hit us up, y'all.
All
Appreciate
right.
you.
Bye,
Remembering
y'all.
me. Remember the days you was like, yeah, let's knock out 2 at a time.
Oh, Lord. We did that one time. It was over. I feel like I can't even hear right now. Oh, my ears.
Oh, yeah, you had the headphones on this time.
Yeah.
Nah, that was perfect.
Whew.
Whew.
I don't never feel how on I am until I'm off.
It's a lot of energy being exerted.
Golly.
Yeah, you're a lot more demonstrative than I am.
Demonstrative.
Yeah.
What is that?
Look it up. Yeah, so you probably feel it more than I do.
Demonstrative. I ain't never heard that word before.
I haven't used it in years.
Expressive, open, forthcoming, emotional, communicative.